Jamie Adelson Goldstein, who's presented many times for CalPRO and knows a lot about CCR and also about doing webinars, has worked with Wendy to prepare this presentation for you. So Wendy, go right ahead.
All right, well, hello. It's so nice to see everybody. Before we get started, I'm going to have you go ahead and take a few polls so that we can see who you are and how familiar you are with the CCR standard. So if you don't mind, just on your own screen, go ahead and fill those out. It's kind of fun. You can see everybody's results start to come in. A lot of us do double duty as teachers and coordinators or teachers and administrators. So it's nice to see what most of our group is made up of. So we see that it looks like most of our group, this is nice, we have a lot of teachers, we have a lot of people with either some familiarity or being new to the college and career readiness standards. A lot of our people here are either not quite launching it yet, they're beginning to discuss, or they are in the process of correlating. So we're all kind of at the beginning or middle beginning phases of rolling out, it seems like. So that's good. So you guys are all pretty much on the same page a little bit here. So that's good. Okay. Awesome. So welcome. Thank you very much for attending. Before we get started, let me first say that this year I have been the fortunate recipient of much college and career readiness training. I've tried to consolidate that into our time together, and we will be providing you with what we hope is both introductory and then also useful for you in your classroom. Okay, so today our goals by the end of this webinar, you'll be able to identify levels and features of the college and career readiness standards. You'll hear me call them the CCRs. You'll be able to correlate the relationship between the CCRs and the depth of knowledge levels. If any of this language is new to you, not to worry, we're about to go through that. We're going to unpack a CCR writing standard, okay? We're going to identify changes in math practices with the CCRs. And then, in addition, we're going to make sure you have access to curriculum planning resources that correlate with the college and career readiness standards. And those will be found on the handout that is for anyone new. It's going to be right now, you see it at the bottom left of your screen. That'll be present throughout the webinar, and you can download those. All right, so let's take a look at the levels. A lot of times when we are going through all of these things, it's sort of like, are we speaking English or are we speaking acronymish, right? And we're a lot of the time speaking acronymish. So I'd like to just see how familiar you are with these acronyms before I go forward and flood you with them. I'm predicting that almost all of us are going to be familiar with CASAs, but let's see here. And you know what's funny about GLE is that you are familiar with it. You're probably just not used to hearing it acronymed on you like that, or acronymed at you like that. So, okay, we all know CASAs. About 60% of us are familiar with hearing the college and career readiness standards called the CCRs or the CCRSs, depending on who's saying it. It's nice to see that about a little more than half of us are already familiar with the depth of knowledge levels, or at least you're familiar with the term depth of knowledge, DOK. And when I say GLE, that is grade level equivalent. So like I said, you have heard it, you just might not be used to hearing it in acronym form. Okay, wow, at least it looks like 70% of us are familiar with DOK. That is great. All right, so let's go and take a look at some of these. Okay. All right, so when I say GLE, I mean grade level equivalent. So as you're used to seeing, for those of you who use the TABE test, you know, you get a TABE score and it says 5.8. That's a high fifth grade level equivalent, okay? For example, on CASAS, you have your scaled scores 180 to 260. And that'll give you a grade level equivalent. One interesting thing that I think is lovely is that the CASAS levels, A through E, they correlate with these college and career readiness standards levels A through E, which is really, really nice. As you read the college and career readiness standards, you'll see these levels in action, and I will make sure that you understand that by the end of this webinar. And then the depth of knowledge, it seems like we're all familiar with the acronym. If anyone doesn't know, that depth of knowledge goes levels 1 through 4. And that measures the level of thinking, the lower levels being a lower level of thinking and deeper thinking occurring at higher levels. Okay, so let's get started by doing an overview of the college and career readiness standards. Okay, we're going to go through and you're really going to develop an understanding of how to read them and how to interpret them. By the way, this is Charlie. He was originally an ESL student, and now he's gone through our college and career readiness high school diploma program. And he has increased through these teaching methods his reading to an 11th grade level, and we're very proud of him. And just to give you an idea of where these college and career readiness standards come from, in a nutshell, they're the K-12 Common Core state standards consolidated into an adult ed format. The language of the standards was not changed or edited, but they were streamlined to avoid any redundancies that would happen when you're trying to consolidate 13 years of education into the short time we have with them. So they've taken the K-12 standards and taken them into 5 levels for adult ed. I feel very lucky to have this document. It is so easy to navigate and very user-friendly. I'm very happy working with it. We're going to be looking at both English language arts and math. We're not going to get into every single part. You'll see in the English language standards, there's the reading, writing, then there's also the speaking and listening, the language, and the reading foundation skills. We won't be looking at those last 3. In math, there are math practice standards. These are basically skills every student should be using as they access the content or as they, act like a mathematician in class. They are things such as attending to precision or thinking critically about results. So these are more general standards. These are not your content standards. So for today's purposes, we're going to be focusing on the math and the writing standards. And when I say math, I mean the math content standards, okay? Okay, so I put together, I dug around for this and I kind of organized this for you guys because, like myself, I thought you would enjoy seeing this together with the grade level equivalents on one page. I believe that most of our ABE instruction is happening right here at the B and C CASAS and college and career readiness level. I don't know if you guys agree, but every school is different. I don't want to speak for every school, but I believe across the board, most of our ABE curriculum and instruction is targeted toward this level. And those are CASAS levels 201 all the way up through 235. And if you look on the left-hand side here, you will see that your grade level equivalent on the left is 2nd to 3rd grade for B, right? And then 4th and 5th grade, and the first part of 6th grade for C. And then once you get into full-on middle school curriculum, you're going to see that that starts entering the adult secondary education. So depending on what your program is, we have a pre-GED program, or some people send them straight into the high school program, just depending on your school. So hopefully that's helpful for you to see it all lined up. Okay. So let's take a quick poll from you guys, and I'd like to just see how would you describe an anchor standard? If anybody can describe how they would personally describe an anchor standard. Or do you have any guesses, if you don't know, what you think an anchor standard might refer to? Okay. Okay, Sharon says that it's a description of the major strand or domain for the targeted skill. Good. I like that you said the major. A basic skill to build on. Yes, Lauren. A standard that exists across grade levels. Good, Wendy. I'm glad that you said that. Hello, Wendy. It's Wendy. Susan, a general objective. Good. Broad standard that... Okay, I like that. My Cupertino Sunnyvale team over here. Yes, obviously knows what they're talking about. A foundation that everything else relates to. Yes, I really like that some of you are saying this thing about crossing grade levels, because you're exactly right when it comes to that. You're going to see that the anchor standard, and this is just an example, I pulled this from the ELA standards. This is what it looks like on the page. It's an umbrella or an overview of the skill that crosses all grade levels. And the anchor standard is written right there at the top of the ELA standards, and then underneath it you have the level standards, which are the teaching standards for each level. So as we go through, you'll see that I'm going to ignore level A for the most part, because that's K through 1, and again, you know, that's more in the ESL levels. I'm going to be focusing on B through E as we go forward. But you don't need to read this. It's obviously too small, and I did that on purpose. I just wanted you to see how it is laid out on the page. Now let's take a look at what the math looks like. Okay, so for our lovely math standards, we are interested in seeing how, if you look at, see how it says level C at the very top there, and then it has underneath the level C the area of study. Okay, math begins with a general area of study. The anchor standard is underneath it, and the level skills that go with it. However, as you can imagine, for math, it would not work to line them up side by side, because the standards are also different for all the levels. So it's going to be a completely different anchor standard for depending on what grade level you're in. So it doesn't really make sense to line them up side by side like the ELA does. So they do look a little bit different. And on the right-hand side, you see how it has anchor standard and then how to teach it. Those how to teach it teaching standards are pretty explicit, and they really tell you how exactly to teach this, which is nice. Alright, so let's go, now that we have taken a look at what the standards look like on the page, and just given you a very brief overview of how they will look when you get into that document, let's talk about depth of knowledge a little bit. This is Cindy, by the way. She's a working mother of 2 and an English learner, and she passed her high school exit exam. She really feels like these reading strategies helped her a lot with that. So, hello, Cindy. Okay. So the question becomes, how does depth of knowledge inform the college and career readiness standards? And why is it even a part of this presentation? The answer to that is that it is deeply ingrained into these ELA standards, and it's really important to understand the depth of knowledge in order to read and use these standards. First of all, it finally provides a way to quantify this higher level thinking. It helps you put your finger on what level of thinking the student is doing. Deeper thinking occurs at higher DOK levels, and the DOK levels provides a roadmap for teachers as they are reading standards and creating content. So it's very useful and valuable for us. It informs the level of thinking a student is doing on a task. For example, someone thinking at a DOK level 1 is practicing things like recall. This is where you have the summarize, what happened in this story, who, what, when, where, why. You're recognizing details from the story and sort of parroting or pulling information from the text, but you're not doing anything in particular with that information. Then at level 2, students are sort of getting into the skill and the concept part of that. This is where we compare and contrast, identify patterns, make predictions. Once you get up to level 3, you're really doing a lot of strategic thinking. This is where students are getting into developing arguments, critiquing and revising, citing evidence. And at level 4, this is where the student is taking all of this work from levels 1 through 3, first summarizing, then comparing, observing, then using what they've learned to make arguments, citing evidence from the text, and finally at level 4, they're taking all that learning and applying it to other situations. So they're synthesizing the knowledge and using it to create and to design. So let's take a look at a standard and see how DOK informs it. Okay, so let's take an example standard from reading. This is just anchor standard number 1. Read closely to determine what a text says explicitly and make logical inferences from it. Okay, so let's, for example, let's see how the DOK levels go up as the CCR levels go up. So let's look at level B. This is the 2nd to 3rd grade level, remember. At level B, this is what the reading standard says. It asks and answers. That's ask and answer who, what, when, where, why, and how. Okay? To demonstrate understanding of key details in a text. Well, I can see what DOK level that is, and I have it highlighted for you because I know that that's a small wheel to look at. But you can see that it says who, what, when, where, why in DOK level 1. So that standard at level B is a DOK level 1 standard. Okay, let's look at level E. Cite strong and thorough textual evidence to support analysis as well as inferences drawn from the text. So these little polls are, where do you see infer, where do you see cite evidence, I'm sorry, where do you see infer, where do you see analyze? Okay. Yeah, you see infer over here in level 2, and you see analyze over here in level 4. So, as you can see, high school students, that's level E, work at a range from DOK level 2 through 4 in one standard. That's pretty typical. There's no formula where high school is only at level 4 and 2nd grade is only at level 1. It's more that as you go up in the college and career readiness or CASAS level, your DOK will gradually go up as well. So as the grade level goes up, the CASAS level goes up, the college and career readiness level goes up, and the thinking level goes up. So everything goes up together. And again, we're quantifying your thinking level. So let's now have you do one. Okay, so let's determine the DOK level of this little guy. Level C. Refer to details and draw inferences from the text. So my poll for you is, which DOK level would you say this is? You have two things in there. You have referring to details and drawing inferences. So what DOK levels would you say that this is asking students to work at or to think at? Level 1 and 2, level 2. We see inferences in level 2. But a question for you is, look at that referring to details. Referring to details is not explicitly stated in the DOKs. So we're trying to find something like, so what are they doing when they're referring to details? You know, are they listing? To me that sounds like listing or stating or recalling. So I would agree with you that this is testing levels 1 and 2. Exactly, identifying. Good. Yeah, Sharon brings up a good point. Is referring to details the same thing as citing evidence? And I would say, and I'm glad that you asked that because I think that that's a really valid, and I was kind of waiting to see if someone would ask that. And you'll see that the citing evidence piece, evidence is always something that's given in support of an argument. So it's citing evidence if they're using it to support a point. But if they are only referring to details, meaning you're only asking them to tell you what happened in the story, then that would be a level 1. So it depends on what you're using the details for. Does that make sense? Would you guys tend to agree with that statement? Yeah. Okay, good. And it would depend, this is the standard, so it would depend what assignment you gave them with the standard. If the assignment had something to do with, you know, arguing a point, then it would be a level 3. But if the assignment was just a summary piece, then it would be at like a level 1. Okay, good. All right. So thank you guys so much for your feedback on that. You guys are a wonderful group. Okay, so let's unpack a writing standard. This is Antonio, by the way. And I really found that teaching the writing standards this way really helped him because he had a lot of higher order thinking, but he was an English learner and had a lot of convention skills missing, so the DOK levels, using those in instruction was so helpful for him in particular. All right, if you've seen the new GED test, you'll know that it is completely aligned to the CCRs. What does this mean? Well, we're saying goodbye to prompts that ask things like, what do you think would be the best way to do XYZ? Or talk about the life of a historical figure you remember from school. All those prompts we've seen. From now on, everything will be in response to a piece of text that the student is given, and the vast majority of texts a student will have to read will be informational, and very few will be biographies. So students will be asked to cite textual evidence to back up whatever argument they're making. So this should be taught at all levels, and as you're teaching ABE, we always want to keep that in mind. So the main changes, the buzzwords, are that the changes are they're being asked to respond to text more. The text has much greater complexity, and if you've been around in California for a little while, you've heard the complexity of texting. It's definitely a buzz phrase. The informational text emphasis, moving from fiction to informational, and then this constant focus on citing textual evidence. So let's unpack an example writing standard. Wendy brings up a really interesting point in the chat box, which ties into something I was going to say in this slide, so I might as well just say it in response to her comment. Some of her students are trying to do higher order thinking, but lacking some of the level 1 skills. Yeah, so the nice thing about this is you can pull out now that you have the DOK, you can pull that out with a lower level text to cite from, and you'll still be able to get a student working at this higher level thinking while you scaffold up the level of what they're reading or writing. So it's a really nice tool. Okay, so let's unpack a writing standard. The anchor standard and the red lettering is my doing. I just was highlighting words that I thought were important. Write arguments to support claims in an analysis of substantive topics or texts using valid reasoning and relevant and sufficient evidence. So to me, the big catchphrases in this were the arguments, right? The analysis, because we just looked at the DOK wheel, right? Analysis of text, that means obviously responding to text. And then the sufficient evidence. And it's not just use any evidence, it's use sufficient evidence, right? So how does this look for our ABE students? Well, at level B, they start them by writing opinion pieces. Because opinion is sort of the introduction to learning to write arguments. So in the ABE levels, they have them writing opinion pieces on topics or texts, supporting a point of view with reasons, and then as you can see, level C, they add "and information." So at level C, they add that supporting their opinion with information, which starts to get into the citing evidence. At level D, then they change it to writing arguments, and then supporting the claims with clear and relevant evidence, clear reasons and relevant evidence. And as you see, as you work your way up through adult secondary, now they're arguing, they're doing an analysis. It's kind of combining all of these skills into one that satisfies the full anchor standard. So as you can see, you see how these build on each other, and you see those bold and underlined phrases that they show you what has been added. I did not do that. That is in the standards for you, so you can very clearly see what they're adding each time. Okay. Briefly, you can see that in this standard, level B students writing opinion pieces are probably doing a DOK level 1, stating or reporting, supporting their point of view with reasons. That's not textual, that's just their personal reasons that they come up with. At level C, you can see that they are supporting the point of view with information, which makes me think of that citing evidence piece, which is the DOK level 3. So you can see how it can jump from level 1 all the way up through level 3 in between 2nd grade and 3rd grade up to 4th and 5th grade level. So when we're doing writing prompts, in summary, they should match the student's college and career readiness level as determined by their CASAS results. They should address the appropriate DOK level, which is stated in the language of that standard, and they should require a response to a text at their level. Okay, let's take a look at I pulled an example of some writing questions from one of my ABE classes. These are the end of chapter questions after reading a passage on the women's suffrage movement. It's a nonfiction passage, and this is a level C, almost D. This is probably an entry 6th grade level. Yeah, I pulled this one because I thought a lot of us might use these books. I know that I've heard a lot of different schools use these books for their ABE classes. So I thought it would be helpful. So as you can see, this is a CCR level C or D. Let's read through the questions. If you have your DOK handout, it might be helpful. But if not, that's fine. You can probably remember from what you just did, and you're a little more familiar with those levels than a lot of groups are. So question 1, why did some women, Susan B. Anthony among them, vote in the election of 1872? Question 2, why did the suffragists begin to focus their attention on changing the Constitution? Question 3, write a summary of the section Call to Action. Question 4, paraphrase or state in your own words what the 19th Amendment says. So what I'd like in the chat poll would be, I would just be curious, at what DOK level approximately do you see these questioning, or what trends do you see in these end of chapter questions? These are the response to text questions that come in the ABE book. And I'll give you guys a couple minutes to respond to that. What trends do you see with regards to the DOK level of these questions? We see some 1 and 2. For those of you seeing 2, I'm just curious, because I have a lot of people all saying level 2. Are you just saying the inferences? Okay, cool. Because it says why. Why did the suffragists begin to focus their attention? So that's, okay. Got it. Okay, Wendy says moving from level 1 to level 2. Yeah, Sunnyvale saying that depending on the text level, it could be level 1 or it could be inference. That's true, because that why question, it depends if it's explicitly stated or not. So they are either making an inference or they are reading something that just says it exactly there in the text. That's exactly right. So I think yeah, cause and effect. Oh, that's interesting. Thank you, Laurel. There's a cause and, that's good. There's a cause and effect correlation in there. I didn't even notice that. I think we're all in agreement. That's nice. We're all thinking that these are on like level 1 and 2, but as you saw, as we're going through, this is a C or D CCR level student, which means this is almost an adult secondary education student. This is almost a high school diploma level student or GED level student. So this student should be at least at a DOK level 3 questioning, if not 4, from what we saw in our standard. So as you can see, we're missing some of those deeper thinking questions here. So if I were an ABE teacher using these materials, as I am and as we all are, I would definitely still be able to use them, but I would have to supplement these with some of my own writing questions to address the higher DOK levels. So it's not necessarily that I need new books and I need new materials. I just need to go through what I have and find and target the places I'm really going to need to think about supplementing. Which brings me to, and thank you guys, your feedback on that was really, really helpful. And you found things I did not find. So when we supplement, okay, when we're creating writing prompts, you're probably, if you're anything like me, you're doing so in a leveled environment. It would be great if we had a class full of ABE learners who were all in a level B or all in a level C. They all had CASA scores within 15 points of each other. But as we all know, that never ever happens, and we're in a leveled environment with some students at probably a low B and some students all the way up through D. And that happens in every classroom. So I wanted to model creating a leveled writing prompt using these standards to hopefully just provide you with a quick model to get you thinking of how you can do this. As you can see, we'll have to supplement. So what will that look like? So I'm going to pick a topic. I picked a topic that I thought would be that would exist in any U.S. history book. I picked the Civil Rights Movement. And I'm going to just keep using that same writing standard that we've been using this whole time. I haven't changed the standard. I'm using the anchor standard that says write arguments, and it started out with writing opinion pieces. I haven't changed it. So I'm going to pick something out of each of the DOK levels and write a writing prompt with it. So in DOK level 1, I picked recalling or summarizing. In level 2, I picked comparing and contrasting. In 3, I picked, I'm going to have them compare and cite evidence as well. And then in level 4, I'm going to have them do analyzing and creating. So I'm going to start out with level B, DOK level 1. I'm going to have them summarize the civil rights movement and what happened. And there was an opinion piece in that standard, so I added the opinion, do agree or disagree with the methods. The opinion piece is actually not very big in most of these standards. I don't want to give you the false impression that the opinion piece exists in many of the writing standards. Actually, it's only in a couple of them. It really only exists in this one to support the process of getting to writing arguments. As we go forward into DOK level 2 and CCR level C, we're having them compare. Let me take this question from Sunnyvale. So you stated prior that we should match the student's CCR level. Should we do that, or should we give the higher order level question but scaffold so that any student with any CCR level can access the content and respond? What I'm showing you right now is a different prompt with a different DOK level for each student's CCR level. But if you wanted to give all the students, for example, let's say you had a room full of students at level B and C, and you wanted to give them all level C but scaffold it appropriately, I think that that would be a perfectly fine method to use as well, if that answers your question adequately. Okay, so I'm showing the leveled version, but you don't have to use this way. Okay, then for level D, I would take my keywords that I pulled from the DOK chart, the argue and the cite evidence, right? This was the whether you believe we experienced similar issues to the 1960s, and cite evidence from the text in life. And then at the high school level, just to show you what one of these prompts looks like in the high school level, because this is what they look like on the GED, I have almost this exact question come to me from a student who just took the ELA GED. Was the civil rights movement successful? Are we in need of another movement? Analyze the success of the civil rights movement. Create a plan for a new movement if you determine it is necessary, and if not, explain why citing evidence from the text in life. So you see how the complexity of these questions and what their thinking is goes up as you move up those levels. Okay, I have it here that I thought I would pause for any questions on this particular thing I just did, on this model that I just did. And I know I already took one, but I see one in the box. So are there any other questions on this particular one? Here's a good question. Do you divide the class into groups? I think that it depends on your class. I think what the Sunnyvale team had said, where they said, should you just create a level C prompt and give it to everybody, but scaffold it for the level B students, perhaps with a lower level text or with other differentiation methods, okay? That would be probably, in my opinion, my ideal strategy if I had a class with 18 level Cs and like 3 level Ds and 3 level Bs, you know what I mean? And so it wouldn't really be worth splitting. But if you have a class that's split into like 50-50 or 30-30-30, it might be worth splitting them into groups and doing it differently. Wendy says that Wendy has a great point. I feel like I'm talking about myself in the third person. Wendy Hoban says, one way to scaffold is to have students at lower levels answer higher level DOK questions verbally and only write the answers to lower level questions. I like that strategy. Or you could give them all 4 and let them pick. Yeah, I like that a lot, to include the discussion piece as well. That's a really good idea. We'll take a couple more questions on that. Summarize looks to be a DOK level 2 skill. You know why I have it in level 1 is because I had it under recall. But you know, if you felt like it was level 2, I don't think that it would ruin the illustration. I feel like I've been in a lot of professional development with people, and one thing I love and hate about the DOK levels is that it definitely stimulates discussion, because a lot of time a verb is not exactly in one of the levels, so you have to come up with the synonyms that you feel like are most fitting. So I think the good thing is that it stimulates discussion, and the hard thing is that it is open to debate. So maybe the discussion is the point, in a way. You know, the fact that we're picking it apart like that is super valuable. So I think that you could argue it either way, and I don't think that there'd be a problem with that. Yeah. Yeah, so here's a good one. Do you ever pair lower levels with higher levels? So there's modeling, absolutely. Pairing for pre-writing is great, but tough to co-write, exactly, at such heterogeneous levels, exactly. All really, really good points. I'm going to let you guys finish up in your chat box right there, and I'm going to move on to the next one, okay? Yeah, all really, really good points brought up in that use sentence starters. Good, yes. All really good points brought up there. Okay, so here's Charlie again. This is just day before yesterday in his cap and gown. He learned math. We're going to get into the math standards and change gears a little bit. Charlie learned math in El Salvador, so very different techniques than we use here. He was an excellent student there before immigrating to the U.S. in early high school. But because we were using the college and career readiness standards, he was really easily able to grasp the shared concepts. And he graduated top of his class with honors. He's got a scholarship, and he is going to college to be a computer scientist in the fall. So we are so proud of him. Okay. Let's take a look. I thought it would be helpful, since I showed this to you up front, but then we got into English language land, and now we're switching gears. Just to remind you, the math, it starts out with the CCR level, which is very nice. Then it goes into the area of study. So in this area of study, I just happened to pull, this is the numbers and operations, the base 10 number system area. And then here's an anchor standard, and here's the teaching standard, tells you how to teach it. Here's another anchor standard, here's the teaching standard. So this is level C. We don't need to read it, I just wanted to remind you. I'm going to focus on showing you how our math practices are changing. The content is not necessarily changing, but the teaching practices definitely are. So let's do, I picked the math content area of number sense and operations in the area of fractions. I picked this particular content area and anchor standard because it really hasn't changed very much, the anchor or umbrella standard for the skill. It hasn't changed very much from our current practice, but the teaching standard has. And I believe it will really provide you with a clear illustration of the shift in thinking for the college and career readiness math teaching that we're providing now. Okay, so first I'm going to show you our, and this is not everybody's current method, but in general how we currently teach this particular skill. So this would be the current practice teaching standard. So if we give them a problem, an anchor standard says taking the multiplication procedures and expanding them to apply to fractions. That is the anchor standard we're working with here. So we would show them a problem, which is multiplying a whole number times a fraction. We would show them that, for example, 5 is 5 over 1, and we can rewrite it to have it be 5 over 1 times 1 over 4. We would teach them this procedure of multiplying straight across the numerator, straight across the denominator, and then we would help them find the answer, 5 over 4. We'd get them straight to the answer. So as the anchor standard says, that they wanted us to take the multiplication procedures that we've learned in whole numbers and expand them to apply to fractions, and that's what we did. And what we've accomplished here is that we've provided students with rules and a roadmap from the problem to the answer. So they get straight from the problem to the answer. They're very happy. The student outcome is that they can solve similar problems using the same strategy when they see them in tests and in life. Okay? Let's take another look at that. Same content area, same anchor standard. And let's really look at that anchor standard. They want us to build fractions from unit fractions by applying and extending previous understanding of operations on whole numbers. Okay. And apply and extend previous understandings of multiplication to multiply a fraction by a whole number. Okay, got it. So it's the same thing we're teaching here. So let's see what the difference is. And this, I am not inventing this. This is verbiage. This is the teaching standard that's telling you. Okay, so it says, understand fraction a over b as a multiple of 1 over b. And it says, for example, use a visual fraction model to represent 5/4 as the product 5 times 1/4. So here's a little fraction model. So what they're looking for, remember the anchor standard, using your understanding of multiplication is what they want them to do. But in this case, they want them to use their understanding of multiplication as repeated addition to understand that 5 times 1/4 is 5 of these 1/4 pieces. So if 1 in the numerator means that there are 1 of these 1/4 pieces, right? Then would 5 in the numerator mean that there are 5 of these 1/4 pieces? So what they're looking for is a really deep understanding. The goal here is to get the students to this equation, that they understand that 5/4 equals the same thing as 5 of these 1/4 pieces, or 5 times 1/4. It's not about finding the answer 5/4. It's about developing a deep understanding of these operations. And I think what this requires is a deeper understanding of multiplication as repeated addition than probably most of our students are coming in with. And it requires fraction models, obviously, as you see from the teaching standard. And it requires discussion, because as you can imagine, teaching it in this way is going to require students discussing this and playing with this and figuring this out. So it's, again, if you look back up at that sentence, it's understanding this fraction a over b as a multiple of 1 over b. It's a really interesting and deep concept for them. So the college and career readiness practice is providing students with a deep understanding of this content so that they can use this deep understanding to inform their calculations, figure out the rules on their own, and extend their thinking to other scenarios. And when they get to the GED test, there won't be a lot of calculations on there. If for those of you who have seen the new GED, it's very scenario-based. It's not really problem as in math calculation problem-based. This is usually my students' reaction to this sort of college and career readiness teaching. Parsa and many other students have felt a sense of relief seeing math taught this way. They never understood why, and they had a hard time memorizing the rules, but they feel like once they know the why, they don't really need the rules, or they can figure out the rules on their own. That said, there's nothing wrong with the rules. In the math practice standards I referred to that we didn't review today, there actually are a few math practice standards that focus on calculations and what they call fluency. So we still need to teach that fluency, but students should learn the concept first, and the goal would be for them to arrive at the rules on their own after developing a deep understanding of the concepts. Deborah brings up the question, what materials can be used to develop this thinking? That's actually a good question here, and I see some information going on in the chat box about that. Yes, Khan Academy is a great resource. We actually have some resources in that handout. I'm going to type this in here so that it's in writing for you guys. EngageNewYork.org has my favorite modules for teaching, obviously to the Common Core, but it's by grade level. But they have my favorite lesson planning modules. They provide already built for you lesson plans and all different ways to get them thinking. I mean, it's explicit. The issue is more picking what you want to do rather than finding enough. It's sorting through what is there. It's very, very helpful. But as Jamie says, there are a lot of videos and lessons, and you can find a lot of links on that handout that should now be at the bottom left of your screen. So I really encourage you to download that. Yes, Take Molly Sundar's class at CalPro, exactly. Yes. Good idea. We love Molly too. Yes. Molly's a colleague of mine. We know each other well. We're so happy to all have each other here today. Okay, so I'm going to open this up for discussion. And I just thought I would let this happen in the chat box, which you guys are kind of already doing. Yes, let's sing We Are the World. That's such a good idea. If you all had microphones, you could do it. I won't do it. So considering the shifts, the college and career readiness shifts in math instruction, what changes can you see making in your math classes? What changes do you feel need to be made in your classes? Chris is going to sing, finally. She's been threatening all day. Oh, it's so interesting that you asked that about Bloom's taxonomy versus the DOK levels. When I started teaching, it was all about the Bloom's taxonomy levels. It's different. I don't know, I'm not the person to ask if one of the researchers originated with the other, and maybe Jamie can answer that question. It's very different. I'm not sure if they originated, I don't know, Jamie. Do they have any common ground in the origin? Yeah, they're definitely different. I'm not sure if, for example, the DOK levels were inspired by Bloom's taxonomy or anything, you know? Yeah, no problem, Pamela. Yeah, and you know, the only thing with the DOK wheel that at least I have found, because I've done a lot of professional development across the K-12, all across K-12 this year, is that there are a lot of DOK charts out there online. I mean, if you start Googling, you're going to find DOK charts with lists and lists and lists and lists and lists of other words on there. So, I mean, I've been torn whether to provide people in professional development with, you know, extra DOK charts. I feel like it's a little bit too much. It's definitely out there, but also I'm just not sure if it's I'm just not sure about the authenticity of it. I just hesitate, you know? Oh, thank you, Jamie. See, I knew she would have, isn't she great? I knew she would have something up her sleeve. Oh, thank you, Michelle. You're more than welcome. No, not enough material on models in math. Deborah, have you checked out the Engage New York stuff? There's a lot on there. I like how they teach it. Yeah, I agree with you, Wendy. Yeah, I mean, at least for me, the shift has been, you know, like you said, spending more time, letting them practice more. And one thing I've heard at a lot of this professional development about the college and career readiness standards has been letting them struggle, and letting them battle with it, and letting them fight with it, and letting them fail at it, and giving them a chance to work through that without, with some guidance, but without being led to it. And at least for me, that's something I'm still really, really struggling with as a teacher, is remembering that, you know, they need to be able to struggle with it and fail sometimes. But sometimes we only have half an hour. Yes. Exactly. Chris is exactly right. They were building the nerve connections in their brains. I'm sure they were always so happy when you told them that. They were like, thank you very much. That's... I tell my students the same thing. It's true. Every time you push yourself out of your comfort zone, you're building a new muscle. That's what I tell them. And they give me dirty looks. They're chicks pecking through the shell. That's right, mental flexing. We're bodybuilders of the mind. I have seen McGraw-Hill Common Core materials for K-12. I have not seen adult ed Common Core materials from McGraw-Hill. Nice. The virtual manipulatives are really nice. Thank you. Yeah, that's really awesome. Thank you so much for adding that. It is sort of like a video game, the virtual manipulatives, in that it's fun and you get to do it on the computer. It is fun. Fun, fun. And as you guys are discussing that, I'm just gonna really quickly go through and just summarize what we learned today. We identified levels and features of the college and career readiness standards. Okay, we really got into those levels, and hopefully you now have an really good understanding of how those tie into the CASAS levels and how there's that relationship between those levels and the depth of knowledge levels, and how to read those and how to create prompts based on those. So how to kind of merge them together, how to unpack those writing standards and really write prompts for them and assess whether you would whether you need to supplement and all that good stuff. Identifying math changes in math practices. I feel like we could do hours and hours of workshops on this alone, and I think we would love it. Identifying those changes in math practices is just that first start, but it's the how-to that you all are searching for, that we are all kind of, as colleagues, getting into. And there's been a lot of really great resources offered on the chat pod, so I definitely would recommend viewing the recording, if not just for that. And then, in addition, don't forget that you'll have access to the curriculum planning resources. There is a good deal in that handout, that webinar handout. There are a lot of really good links in there. Yes, Wendy Hoban makes a really good point on the virtual manipulatives. I'm glad that you said that. A lot of them require a Java player for it. If you're on Chrome, every once in a while you can run into some Java issues, etc. Just so you know. But yes, a lot of those virtual manipulatives are Java based.
Wendy, this is Mary, and I just want to thank you so much for you provided so much information in an hour.
Oh, well, good.
People are busily digesting that. And I wanted to give Catherine Green a chance to talk about some of the other resources that CalPRO has to offer that are related to these topics. And before I do that, though, I want you guys to go up to the little guy with the waving hand and find the icon for applause and give Wendy some applause because she did a great job.
Oh, thank you. I'm so glad.
And Catherine, do you have audio?
Sure. Sure, I think I have audio. Wendy, I also wanted to thank you. This was tremendous. I learned so much.
Oh, good. Well, thank you.
The other thing I wanted to share with folks is that we have a newly reopened electronic community of practice, which has discussion forums related to some of today's topics as well as others. And the link for that is in your handout. It's also in the chat pod. We're also interested in forming some additional sharing of resources, lesson plans, curricular resources related to CCRS aligned materials and instruction. CalPRO has, as of today, a very new and wonderful writing class, a self-directed online course on effective strategies for writing instruction. You can find more information about that and a link to register for it on our homepage on the CalPro website. And finally, in June, we have, related to this topic, 2 upcoming online workshops in this kind of environment, and they are on teaching critical thinking. So just the same kinds of skills that are clearly needed for CCRS related instruction, exams, and the life that we live in now. I really would like everybody to take advantage of that. Those are available through our June calendar registration. They're available on Monday, June 23rd and Wednesday, June 25th from 1 to 2:30 in the afternoon. So thanks for letting me say those plugs. If you have any questions about any of these, feel free to email me, and I'll just pop my email address here in the chat pod. So great, thank you.
Thanks, Catherine. And on that note, perfect timing, Wendy. It's exactly 2 p.m., if you can believe it. Thank you, everyone, for spending part of your Friday afternoon with us. Have a fabulous weekend, and we hope to see you at the next webinar. When I close the meeting, you're going to be taken to an evaluation form. It might be in another browser window behind this window. And if you don't find it, I put the link up here in the chat, so you can just copy that link and go to it right now, or hopefully you will see it shortly. Thank you very much.